Hey everyone, just wanted to catch you all up on my Nissan Leaf battery system and how I charge it. I found a couple ways to charge it I think that really help with me not overcharging it and me also being able to charge it up quickly. So what we have here is a snap-on. It's a 6/12/24 volt charger, and I think it'll do 10 amps trickle charge, 30 amps and up to 50 amps, which is really interesting for me and for this project, because to be able to charge at 24 volts at 50 amps is around 1300 watts, and my battery pack is the full capability when new, I guess, would be around 3000 watts, but I think my pack is probably 70% available, 60 to 70% available. It's just because of the age and how many miles that were probably on the Nissan Leaf before I got it. But nonetheless, I did discharge the battery as I was running a test, and so the battery, if you look, it's kind of hard to see. One of the elements are burned out here, but it's a little over 21 volts. It says 21.2 if you can't see it on there. I do apologize. It's a bright sunny day out today. But what we're going to do is we're going to turn the charger on here, and I'm going to show you how many DC amps it's using. I do have a clamp meter hooked up right here. It's a Fluke 336, and right now it's showing DC amps, and I have them zeroed out. So if I pull back, you'll see that goes to the positive lead, and it's going through the clamp on amp meter. So what we're going to do here is the markings are off this, but I know what they are. That top line is 6 volts, that's 12, that's 24 volt, that's manual charge setting. I'm sorry, that's not manual charge. I should put the label back on it. That's a setting that you could use when you're, I think, calibrating or doing something on the computer. It keeps it at a steady voltage. But over on this side is the settings, I think, for like regular battery, AGM, gel type. And this setting down here is for manual charge. And over here is the amperage. I think this is like a trickle charge, slow, medium, and then high charge. And so what I'm going to do is just set this to fast charge at 24 volts. And what I'm going to do, just because I probably forget what these things were, I did actually have a screenshot pulled out of what these are so I don't forget. And so what we're aiming for here is 24 volts, which is the third setting down, and we want to put it on manual charge. And we want to do rapid, which is the highest amperage we have. So you can see here, do 4 amps, 15 amps, or 60 amps up to, and then 300 amp for motor start. So what we're going to do is just go ahead and change this. So if we go to this one here, we're going to set it to manual charger, which is down here. And we're going to change that to 24 volts. So we're on a manual charge, rapid charge, 24 volt setting, and this over here is a timer. Now, why is this important? Well, I don't want to overcharge these batteries, and I don't really want to be babysitting them every 5 minutes. So I know that my pack will hold at least 1600 watts, and what I'm going to do is set this timer to 1 hour, and I'm going to check on it probably at the half-hour mark. I'm going to check the voltage just to make sure I'm not over voltage to the batteries. Because ideally, remember, these batteries, you cannot go over 4.2 volts on a cell. So we're going to have to be very mindful of that as this battery starts charging. But anyway, I have the timer set for 60 minutes, and I'm going to hit the start button. It's going to come on, and it's going to, voltage is going to go to the battery pack. It's going to see how discharged it is, and that's going to figure out how many amps to send to this battery. So it just kicked on, so we're gonna look. So right now it's charging at 20 amps. That's okay. I'm totally okay with that. I think that's somewhere around 700 watts. when I ran this test yesterday, I think it was a few days ago, I was pulling 50 amps through the charger to the battery, which was great, which I think that's around 1200 watts. And the issue with it pulling 50 amps through there is that you have to be careful how fast you charge the battery. Remember, the faster you charge the battery, the hotter everything gets. So I believe the 1C on these batteries, because this is technically a 66 amp hour battery, I would have been okay at 50 amps charging that. I don't think it's going to get too hot at 50 amps, but 20 is a much safer amperage. So if you can see here, we're pulling 20 amps right now. So you would take 20 amps times 24 volts, and that tells you how many watts you're putting through. Now, I didn't know if I turned it on if it was going to go to 50 or 20, and quite frankly, I'm not sure why it's not doing 50 right now instead of 20. It could have to do with how loose or how tight I have these connections, that I'm clamping to. So what I could do is try to readjust those to see if I can get a better bite on those to see if that would increase it. But to be very honest with you, I might just end up leaving it alone here at 20 amps because I'm putting in, I don't have my calculator in front of me. Well, let's just say that was 500 watts. It would take 3 hours to charge at 500 watts. So what I'm gonna do is leave this timer set for 1 hour, and I'll come back and check it in the 1 hour mark. You can see right there, it's hard to see, but it says 58 minutes. So it'll start counting down 57 minutes, 56 minutes, and it will shut off its charge after 1 hour. And the second component to this is once I start getting close to the maximum wattage of the battery, I'll start putting this through. What I found to be very accurate is my charge controller. So I'm using a solar charge controller, but I'm not using solar panels. I'm using a battery charger. So what I'll do is I will, after, however long this takes to get us close, which will probably be about the 3 hour mark, I will go back to this battery charger here, which I think this is a max around a little over 200 watts. I think safely on the spec it says 150 watt power supply, but I believe we could probably run that at 200 watts. But what I will do is I will hook these leads up to the solar charge controller here, which this is a Morningstar tristar mppt. I think it's a TS60, and it has a web interface, so we'll be able to look at the charge parameters of the charging on the laptop in the house when we get to that point. So we'll show you all that later. But the nice thing about this charge controller, and I'll show you how I have it programmed, is I have it set to max charge really at 4.14 volts a cell. Now, there's no BMS on there, so it's really the total of the battery pack. So I think that's 24.6 or something for this particular battery configuration. So if you take 24.6 divided by 3 divided by 2, that'll give you back to your single cell voltage, which I have it really set not to go over 4.14 volts. And it'll bulk charge, and then it'll do what they call a constant voltage charge, which is kind of exactly how you want it. You want a current charge, bulk current, and then once it gets to a certain voltage, you want it to go into constant voltage, which the reason I found, and I'll explain this a little later in the video, there's a couple settings you can put in here. One is called a high voltage disconnect, and some people just set that, so if it gets to 4.14 volts, it'll just disconnect. What I like to have mine set for is for it to go into a constant voltage at 4.14, and then what you'll notice is it kind of trickle charges, and I noticed with these Nissan Leaf batteries, there's a slight difference if you just shut it off, or as if you, when it hits the 4.14, or if you let it stay at 1.14, it'll stay there for, I don't know, maybe a good hour, and it'll still put wattage into the pack. And these packs seem to bounce a lot, and what I mean by that is if I charge to 4.14 and I just shut it off real quick, the cell tends to bounce, like it might then drop to 4.10 or 4.05 or something like that. And if I do it the other way with constant voltage, when I take it off, it seems to stay there at that voltage. So if I charge to 4.14 at constant voltage, when I disconnect it and leave it, it stays at 4.14. So I do believe there is a little bit more going into the battery by doing it that way as to just disconnecting it. I did read some articles on YouTube where other people just set the high voltage disconnect. Now I do have my high voltage disconnect set, but I have it set for 4.20. So that means if for some reason something bad happened, the voltage would disconnect itself from the battery to the solar mppt charge controller at 4.20. So it's kind of like a fail-safe is the way I'm using it, and other people are using it to just stop charging at that point. But like I said, we'll get into all that a little later. So you can see it creeped up a little bit to 21.5 on the amps, and because I'm going to be walking away from this, that's why I'm not going to increase that over there to 3 hours of charging, because for all I know, as soon as I walk away, that might, now it's up to 22, that could very well drift up to 50 DC amps, and then I would be, in effect, overcharging and overheating the batteries if I left that on for 3 hours. So bottom line is, right now it's about 4 o'clock, so I'm going to check back somewhere around 4:30, and we'll see how many amps I'm looking at and what the voltage on the battery is. So, we can tell right now, just coming back here, well, you can't see it now, but there's 53 minutes left. I guess what I could do is just turn this on real quick to give you an idea. So I'm just going to connect into the positive and negative of the battery, and we're going to do a voltage check. So you can see right there, we're at 22.15 at the battery. So that's where our voltage is. We obviously need to get up over 24 volts, and we'll check back. Okay, so I got here a little after the 1 hour mark, but you can see the voltage it looks like 23.3. We'll check it at the actual battery. And it's very bright out here, so hopefully you can see this. I don't know if you're going to be able to or not, but let's see. Okay, 23.36. So basically we probably put in, I don't know, around 700 watts, 700 watts. I don't have a calculator, but what we're going to do now is move on to the second part, which is kind of like the slower charging. So we're going to take this smaller charger and we're going to connect the smaller charger up. And I'll show you how that works here in a minute. Oh, thing is heavy. Okay. We got one hand here, so we're gonna unplug that snap-on charger, and we're gonna plug in this smaller battery charger. Okay. So and then we're gonna turn it on and. Okay. So, sorry you're not seeing all this, but I only have one hand here, but I'm connecting up the positive, and then I'm just going to shut this off just to make sure cause any damage. Okay, so basically from the battery charger, the smaller battery charger goes into the MPT charge controller, and what this is going to allow us to do is to charge the rest of this battery up and not have to worry about watching it, because the controller will be regulating the voltage. So we are running at 24 volts. So this battery charger I think can do, from 0 to 32 volts. So it has two settings. Down below is 0 to 16, up above 0 to 32. And then this controls the current and the voltage going in. So we're going to head and turn it on. And then once the solar mppt scans, it's going to look for the voltage. So you saw it right there, it jumped up. So what I'm going to do is just set this, I'm going to crank this up and probably set it up to 8 amps. So we're running probably right around 2336 because that's what the battery was, maybe a little higher, at 8 amps. So give or take, that I don't have a calculator on me, but I'm guessing roughly around 200 watts is what we're going to be putting into it. So what we'll do next is we'll go to the laptop and we'll look at some of these numbers. Okay, so we're at the laptop, and this is a program called MSView from Morningstar, which is for the TriStar controller. But you know, the things to note here is, you know, this is the what's called the array voltage because it's technically a solar charge controller. But you can see the battery voltage is 2394, the current 7.25, and we're bringing in 172.81 watts. And then at the battery, you can see the battery voltage 2358. The battery current's 40, and we're putting in 173 watts into the battery. And then you can see I have the target voltage set to 2484. And if you do the math on that, 24.84 divided by 3 divided by 2, you see I have it set to 4.14 volts. Now I don't have a BMS on here, but I will tell you these Nissan cells are very good in when they charge very evenly. And we'll show that later on as we get closer. I'll do a shot of the battery voltage at each cell, and you can see how closely each cell is to each other when it's charging. So again, I have it set so that it does not exceed 24.84 for the entire battery pack. And I have a total of 6 modules. And they're configured in series and in parallel, so they're kind of like wired in such a way that it gives me a 24-volt battery bank. And again, we'll go to each battery later, and I'll show you the voltage as it's charging. But this is kind of what it looks like on the MSView panel on the computer. Okay, we'll cut back in as we get closer to 24 volts on the battery. So guys, I wanted to pick up where we left off and show you something else that's kind of cool with this Morningstar TriStar controller. So it also has a web interface in addition to the MSView that allows you to kind of see what's going on with some basic parameters of the charge controller. So here you can see we have 24.6 volts coming in, 8 amps, and we're pulling about 215 watts from the battery, and I'm sorry, from the battery charger. What's going into the battery pack is 24.13. The target voltage, like I told you before, is 2484, 8.4 amps. mppt is the charge state is like a bulk state. On their older PWM controllers, I think it said bulk. The next stage over will be absorption, and that's when the voltage hits 24.14. It'll go into absorption, which is almost like a constant a voltage mode. So we're putting in 204 watts. I think in this mode I've been running for about 2 hours. I think that was around 5 o'clock. We did this, it's around 7. So we put about 400 additional watts into the battery pack since we last checked. And if you take 24.13 and you divide that by 3 and you divide that by 2, I think the math is like a little bit over 4.02 volts a cell. So we're going to check that. I told you we'd check that real quick on each individual cell. This might get a little hard for me to do with one hand, but we're going to try. So try to make it so you can see this. The sun's coming in, so it's making it really hard to see. I'm going to put that there. Okay, what I'm going to do is just kind of basically go up and down here from left to right on the bottom. So at the very bottom, I'm going to go here first, and you're going to see we're at 4.00. I'm going to kind of just go right to the other side. Now it's going to show negative because I didn't flip the positive and negatives. Take that back. .4, and then over here 3.99, and we're going to go up 1, which should be the same thing, 3.99, 4.0, and then we're going to go over 1, 3.99. Then we're going to go up to the next block, which is right here, 4.0, and then we're going to go kind of across 4.0, then we'll go up 1, 4.0, and then we're going to go over 1, 4.0, and then we're going to go up 1, 3.998, and then over 1, 3.997, and then we're going to go up 1 more. Can't even see it. I can't see it, but 3.99, and then over 1, 3.99. So you can see, yeah, should I have a BMS on here? Yeah, but what I just showed you was how close those cells were to each other charging. They were unbelievably close. Now I'm just going to measure the entire pack volt, so I'm going to go here to here, and you'll see we're at 2400. So we weren't very off from what the actual charge controller was reporting. I'm sorry, yeah, the actual mppt charge controller. And the reason it's probably slightly higher is because the voltage right here is probably a little higher than the voltage is here, as the voltage would be at the battery pack. And so we'll see. So I'll just go, I'm going down to the charge controller, and I'm going to measure it right there. And you'll see it's dead on to what it says. So you can see how it says 20, oh, I took it off of there. It says 2414 at the controller. Now up here at the higher spot where it connects, I'll show you that. You know, that's 2407, and then obviously down below you saw here where it's 2400. Now, you know, the reason there is the resistance in the wires, you know, so that's why you're seeing a difference from, you know, here to up here to down there. But I will tell you, when this goes into absorption or constant voltage, and it sits there for about, I don't know, up to an hour, I observed it last time, it really does equal all these things out. So when it sits there at whatever it's going to sit at, 2484, and I'll come back and we'll do that, I'll show you. But it'll say 2414 right here, it'll say 2414 right there, I'm sorry, 2484, 2484, 2484, and then 2484 down there. And then each cell will be around 4.14. The reason I stop at 4.14 is these cells are not new. Typically you could probably go to 4.20 with a new cell. That's the max charging voltage you're supposed to go to. I feel that, you know, anything around 4.10 is probably a safe spot for these batteries. I just don't want to push it to 4.20. I don't know how old the batteries are or anything like that, so I stop at that 4.14, which is 2484 if you do the math on that. 2484 divided by 3 divided by 2. And the reason I'm doing that is because, you know, these, just to kind of give you an idea, these two modules are in parallel, these two are in parallel, and then those two up there in parallel. So it's kind of like 4, 8, 12. You know, so 4 volts, 8 volts, 12 volts, and then that pack's in parallel with this second pack. So these first 3 are in parallel with these 3. So it's really 12 plus 12, and that's how I get to 24. Okay, we'll come back when this thing is fully charged and it'll go into absorption mode. Okay, I just wanted to show you all here that the process has finally entered the absorption stage. So if you can see right there, it says charge state absorption. Notice that the array voltage, remember again, my battery charger is hooked up to that, but it's now saying 32 volts with 4 amps.
and 128 watts. But if you come down here to this line, the battery voltage is 2484 now. So basically it's switched itself now to a constant voltage. And what will happen here over the next hour is you'll see that the output power, the 138 watts, will eventually keep going down and down and down and down. So the battery is really almost full. It does not have much capacity to push into it at this point, so that's really good. So what we'll do is we'll come back and we'll try to get another shot here when the wattage goes down to barely anything, and then you'll see that the it has met its a requirement of staying in the absorption stage. And I'll also go through, matter of fact, maybe I can do it now, kind of go through the how I have this thing configured. So remember, this is a TriStar mppt. This controller is not cheap. It's about $550 to $600. You can actually get a cheaper version of the TriStar controller. Matter of fact, I have one down here. That's a TriStar TS45. It's not an mppt controller, it's the older PWM, but it kind of uses the same charging algorithm in that it goes bulk. It's essentially a 4-stage charger. So you got bulk, or in the mppt case, it's called mppt. Then it gets absorption, and then you have something called equalize, which we don't really use for lithium-ion batteries. That's mostly used for lead acid and some other types of batteries. And then you have the float stage, and again, I'm not using float stage either. So we're really just using bulk and absorption for these lithium ions. But anyway, the point is you can buy that TS45 for, you could probably find it cheap for $100, maybe a little more used. I think I go for like around 150 new. But anyway, if you go into edit here, you'll be able to see the difference of how I have it set up. Okay, you can see how mine says 12.42. So if you take 12.42 and you times that by 2, you get 2484, and that's what you've seen on mine. The absorption time I have set for 2 hours and 30 minutes. It's really going to stay in absorption mode because of the way I have this configured. I don't have it set to go into anything else other than absorption. It never goes into float. So I uncheck the absorption extension. I don't adjust for any battery temperature because this is lithium ion. We don't want to do anything with that, so I set that to 0. Uncheck that if it's checked, a service reminder. And then again, you can see how I have the float disabled. I shut off the equalize, and here I have the high voltage disconnect. I spoke of this earlier. This is really set so if something would go crazy with the battery charger and something catastrophic happened, it would disconnect at 4.20 a cell, which is, if you take 1260 and you times that by 2, you would see that's 25.2 divided by 3 divided by 2 ultimately gets you to 4.2. So that's why I have that set there. The high voltage reconnect, I haven't played with this, but only because I don't have a solar hooked up to it, but I would probably set this to come back on at something like maybe 3.9 volts or even 4 volts a cell. That would kind of, if it did go into a disconnect, it would come back on at a certain voltage that you set there. But I have this enabled really for the high voltage disconnect. And then I have this maximum regulation limit set to 12.60 again, that would never go over, I think, 4.20. And from what I understand, this setting is it's a setting that doesn't care about the voltage compensation. So that's the maximum regulation that it would allow. You can limit your incoming battery current if you wanted. I don't have mine set to do that. And then you could just mess with these light settings on the TriStar. So if you wanted the lights to coordinate to come on in different colors at different times, it's just a way to identify what stage the battery's charging in. And then it's logging, and then there's just some settings for the TCP/IP. You could have it send you emails. So it's got a lot of cool functionality that I just don't use. And then when you're all done, if you wanted to change something, you would write to the file. I'm sorry, you could do one of two things: write to the file and then program. If you write to the file, that way you could recall that setting. If you had another tristar, you could read from that file that you wrote to and then program. So I've already programmed mine, so I obviously don't need to do that, but I wanted to show you how I have mine set up. It seems to be working very well with the way I have it configured with my lithium ion, and I just thought this was a neat way to ultimately get my lithiums charged. Again, I don't have a BMS, so it's not monitoring individual cells, but the last stage of this, you can see right now the whoops, this is touchscreen, but you can see where it's already starting to taper off. The output's down to 115 from just a few minutes ago. And what I'll do is when it gets down to hardly anything, I'll go back out and show you the battery voltage at each cell on the Nissan Leaf battery, so you can see why I really haven't bought a BMS yet. Okay, so here's a quick shot before I head out into the garage and measure the batteries, but you can see the output power right there is down to 4 watts. So the voltage is 2484, and we're going to go measure this at the battery at this point. It's interesting how it just jumped up to 13 watts, but I think the wattage is low enough right now that we can go out there. And also notice that the charge state is actually absorption. So we're gonna go out in the garage and measure it. Okay, back out into the garage here. Remember, it was 2484, and that's about 4.14 volts a cell. I'm gonna try to bring this up a little closer. Doing this one hand, so it's gonna be a little hard, but we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna go here, 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 and so on and so forth. So first cell, 4.137. We'll jump over to this side, negative 41.39. So you can see it's very, very good. 4.137, 4.139. I'm going to go up here to the next one. 4.149, okay. 4.144. And up here now, 4.151. 4.14. Going up here, 4.131. Connect in here. 4.129. So you can see how we're 0.02% off, I guess, right? So, we got 4.12, 4.13, and I think the highest was 4.15. Now keep in mind, it is still charging. At this point, I don't even need it to charge anymore. And if I disconnected these actually might be a little closer in regulation to each other. But for all intents and purposes, most people's multimeters won't even be able to distinguish those differences. This Fluke has a very high accuracy, so it's able to distinguish those differences of a 1/100%. So another reason, to go to 4.14, you notice that one cell went to 4.15, right? So if I would have went to 4.20, it's quite possible that it might have went to 4.201 or something and been slightly higher, which is not good. So I created a little buffer in there. So 4.14, if one of the cells did happen to go slightly higher, I think I would still be in the safe zone. So again, this really just demonstrates a way to use this solar charge controller to really provide voltage regulation for either a solar panel or even a battery charger, as I have just demonstrated there. What I'm going to do is we'll take a quick look at just disconnecting, because again, the battery's fully charged at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and just power off the solar. Again, that's a battery charger, but we can call it a solar array
for all intents and purposes, it's just providing DC power. And then what I'm going to go ahead and do is just disconnect the charge controller. So now there is nothing at all. And we should wait for it to stabilize a few seconds, but we're not. We're just going to go ahead and test it out here and see where we're at. 24.83, which was super close to 24.84, and then we'll test it at the battery. This is really hard with one hand. 24.82, and then if we go start doing individual cells again, 4.136, 4.138, 4.136, 4.138, 4.148, 4.145, 4.151, almost the same thing we had before. But like I said, when it's disconnected, the cells will get slightly closer to each other, and they'll all hover around the 4.14 mark. Again, 1/100th of a percent the difference between 4.14 and 4.15 for me, that's really unnoticeable, and I can really care less that they're that much of an indifference. Again, with a BMS, it would most likely be highly accurate, but I'm just leery of some of the cheap BMSs out there, some of these cheap ones on the marketplace. I'm just leery of using one of those, and the more expensive ones, the ones I've seen are around $300, and really for what I use this for, I don't know if I'm going to buy one at $300, but if a reasonable one that was made by a reputable company came online for a decent price, I probably would get one just for that extra insurance of not having to worry about a cell going over voltage or under voltage too much. So, but again, I rarely use this thing. I pretty much just use it for testing, and when we have a rare occasions of a power outage. So anyway, that wraps up this video.